At a command from the Monitorial order, all boys would rise from their seats, turn to face right, and exit their row of benches. They marched clockwise around the room until they reached their allocated draft station, those semicircles next to the wall. In their groups of 8 to 10, they would stand with their toes on the line. The monitor teaching them stood inside the semicircle. The most knowledgeable boy in the group wore a badge that read First Boy and stood at the top of the line. He would definitely feel rewarded by having that badge. Hanging on the higher of the 2 rails were lesson boards, from which the monitor would select the required lesson. And here we have another example of economy. Books were expensive, so printed materials, developed by Lancaster and printed by him, could be purchased from the Borough Road School as an unbound portfolio, or sometimes given to schools in the form of a grant. They were pasted onto the teaching boards and were relatively cheap. So essentially, one book could teach many boys. There was no need to buy a book for each boy. The monitor would read a part of the lesson board and command the boys to repeat, and repeat, and repeat again. It was learning by rote, using the stick to point to a scholar who he wanted to answer. The stick was only for pointing, never for punishment. Wrong answers led to a child being moved down to the bottom of the line. Or, if one boy made a mistake, another, lower down the line who could answer, would swap places with him. The first would be shamed by his error. The second would be rewarded by being moved up. The theory continues. The boys at the top were proud to be there and would work very hard to stay there. Those at the bottom were ashamed and would try to improve. After 20 minutes of learning by rote, the scholars would return to their places at the desks to practice what they had learnt. Beginners would practice their letters or numbers by writing in sand. Work in sand could be done, checked, and erased an infinite number of times. Another economy. Later, pupils would move on to writing on slates, and eventually at higher levels onto pen and paper. But only paper when they knew how to write, for both pen and ink were expensive. The monitors would inspect the work, and when satisfied that each boy had learned well, he would indicate to the master that they were ready for inspection. And this was done by rotating the telegraph sign to show EX, which stands for examined. And this was a silent way of letting the master know the amount of conversation and noise had to be kept down.